Welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast, the podcast that helps moms take care of themselves so they can take better care of everyone else. This episode is sponsored by my program, Step by Step to an Amazing Morning Routine. This program will help you to create stress-free mornings. To get all the details, visit momswhoknowpodcast.com. Hi, Jo. Thank you so much for being on the call today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, everyone. My guest today is Jo Isley, and I'm so excited to have her on the call to talk a little bit about her family and specifically her oldest daughter and some of the struggles and health challenges that she's had and kind of how that has affected their family. So Jo is someone that I know. We have kids at the same school, and she's one of these people that is just so much fun to follow online. So I didn't tell you ahead of time, Jo, that I was going to say this, but it's so true. I love to see, you're just so witty and fun, and it's so fun to get this glimpse into what life with your family is like. And you guys are always making me laugh. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. So tell everyone who is new to you just a little bit about your family.
Well, my husband and I have been married for 16 years, and we have 4 kids. Our oldest daughter is 13, and she is adopted. I was finishing up a degree, and I had to do some training, and I saw her at a children's subacute care facility, and I came home and asked my husband if we could adopt her. And then
that is so cool.
Isn't that a crack up? And so it's a really good story. And then what happened was we had a miscarriage the first year we were married, and this was now 5 years into our marriage, and we still had not gotten pregnant. And I thought, well, we'll just adopt. Like, okay. Well, the adoption was finalized a year later, and 2 months later, I was pregnant.
Wow.
And yeah, it was like, and then we just didn't stop. It was like baby after baby after baby. So I started earlier in life. I didn't adopt Lacey till I was in my 30s. So I didn't have my bio kids until, all through my 30s. Probably had I started in my 20s, we'd have like 9 or 10 kids. I just love having kids.
That's awesome. Now, I don't think you said for the listeners how many kids you guys have at this point.
We have 4 kids. So we adopted Lacey, our oldest, and then we have 3 biological. So 13, 8, 7, and 5.
Okay. Fun. All right. So tell me this. I want to know a little bit more about this situation. So you saw Lacey, and was it just a situation where you were like, she's the one, she needs to be in our family?
It was. My parents said, and I remember even as a kid, I always said, well, I'm going to adopt. I just knew. I knew that I was going to adopt. And when I met my husband, I said to him, look, I plan to adopt. And he said, okay. Like he was always really cool with it. So I was doing this my rotations for clinics, and I saw her there. So there I was at this children's subacute care facility, which is like a hospital for kids who are on life support, on ventilators. And my daughter has a rare genetic disorder where she has to be put on a ventilator every night when she goes to sleep. So she was 2.5 when I saw her, and she was walking down the hallway, and the person who was with her said, "Say hello, Lacey." And she said, "Hello, Lacey." And I just cracked up. Said, "That's my kid."
Aww.
So I asked, "What's the story with this kid?" And they said, well, she has a disorder where her brain does not tell her body to breathe when she falls asleep. So every night she stops breathing. So she has to be put on a ventilator. And if she doesn't go on the ventilator, she'll die. So she has the tube in her throat, the trach, where they connect the tubing so she can breathe every night. Well, her mom did not have the ability to raise her, care for her properly. And so she had been there since she was 6 months old and was now 2.5. And they said the mom cannot do what's required of her, and they're now looking to find a home for this child. And my arm shot up in the air. I'll take her.
So no hesitation, no like, wow, this is going to be really hard. This is going to, not only signing up for a child to raise, but also for medical, issues. Did you hesitate in that way at all, or?
Not for a minute. And I joke because people think what you have done. People say, "Oh, what you've done is just so amazing." And I think, well, we really didn't realize how hard it was going to be. I mean, I will do it in a heartbeat all over again. Um, but yeah, it's challenging, but no, we just didn't think through that. We knew that my husband and I were both respiratory therapists. This is a child who needs to be on a ventilator. Respiratory therapists run ventilators. Where else are you going to find a home where both parents are completely skilled to care for this child?
Yeah.
It just seemed like we had to. And this was, why not? Let's do it. Let's go. Okay. And off we were running.
That's amazing. And such a good point. I mean, yeah, where better to have her than in a family of people who know how to take care of her and can do that. So that's really neat. And also very interesting how that all worked out for you to have your first biological baby so soon after that,
Right.
to get pregnant, very soon. So yeah, just that the timing all worked out and you were able to get her in your home and then start having babies.
Yeah. Yeah. I believe it was just the way it was supposed to happen, because had I been having biological kids, I don't know that I would have been open to, well, let's adopt. So the timing was perfect.
Yes. Okay. Now talk to us a little bit more about Laceys diagnosis, kind of what it means for, obviously she's on a ventilator at night. What else goes into this? What else does this entail?
Well, there's actually a lot that CCHS, congenital central hypoventilation syndrome, entails. It's one of the rarest genetic disorders that they have. I think in the United States, there is less than 1,000 people with it. And it's usually diagnosed immediately or very quickly after birth, at least when they're very young. So Lacey got her diagnosis, and it entails every night she has to be put on. At the time we adopted her, she had the tube in her neck, the trach, so we had to hook it up. She's now had the trach taken out, and she puts a mask on her face every night. And when she goes to sleep, and the ventilator breathes for her. But in addition to just the breathing, they have a lot of GI issues where they just have to be really careful with what they can eat and what they can't eat, and they can be really sensitive to that. And then also they have heart issues. So the wiring is a little weird, so they can get a lot of heart, it'll miss beats. And so she gets tested every year to make sure that she's not showing signs of that. But they found that as these kids get older, their hearts kind of deteriorate, so they have to get a pacemaker put in. So I'm sure we're heading into that probably in the next couple of years. They have very low sense of, very high ability for pain. And so they don't feel a lot of stuff, and they can't localize pain. So she'll know that something's wrong, but she can't tell me where. She'll just say, it hurts in my stomach. Well, what kind of hurt? Well, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right. So they can't localize and tell you pain, but it's usually very, like, ear infections will be so bad before they'll ever say anything because they just don't feel it.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to watch these kids like a hawk, because they can't tell you something's wrong. They just won't do it because for whatever reason, they can't. And so you have to make sure that they're healthy and they're okay, because when they crash and burn, it's really scary. It goes so quick. In fact, we've lost 2 CCHSers in the past, I think 6 weeks, 2 have passed away. So it's like they look perfectly healthy, but they can go so bad so quickly. So you have to be able to pivot quickly, health-wise, to make sure that they're always okay.
So that must be so hard as a family, and with 4 kids, just always being aware. I know for me, with all my kids, sometimes, just little things like, wait, when was the last time you took a bath? Sometimes things slip through the cracks, right? So I imagine that, with a big family, that's hard to always be right on it and to be noticing everything that's going on with her health.
It is. It is. I think there's just kind of certain standards we have. Like we routinely check her oxygen. You monitor that and make sure it's not low. And if she's not feeling well, you just kind of check things and make sure that everything is okay. And the minute you realize something's off, you move quickly to fix it. You can't say, well, we'll call the doctor tomorrow. Like she gets into the doctor today. So we've just learned to move quickly to fix it. My husband works at the Children's Hospital, so he has more. When I worked in the hospital, I worked with adults, but because of his experience with kids, I think he's so much more helpful in that situation because he knows what bad situations look like and he knows how to fix them quickly.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's good. That's so good
Yeah.
to have him keeping an eye out. Now, I
Yes.
know that that is not the only diagnosis that Lacey's dealing with, right?
No, this CCHS comes with a whole bunch of party favors that go along with it. And what we didn't know and what we were so it's ironic because the medical part seems really scary. But for us, I'd say I could take 10 of these kids with a medical situation. What really threw me and really challenged my parenting was an autism diagnosis. We just started seeing behaviors that we couldn't figure out and we didn't understand, and I didn't know why. And finally, we were able to get her into a neurologist, and they went through this whole study and they sat down and said, she's on the spectrum. She has autism. And so that has been probably our biggest shift in dealing with her.
So how old was she when they diagnosed her with autism?
I think she was in first grade. So, at like 6.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about that. How was that for you as a parent? How did that feel and how did it change things in your family?
Well, at first it was really hard. I mean, I came home and was just shaken because I didn't know what it meant. I just, all I knew is I saw, you know, a cure for autism bumper stickers. So I thought, well, you don't want it if they've made a bumper sticker to cure it, I mean, that's all I knew. And so I came home in tears to my husband and, he was at home with watching the other kids while I went to get the diagnosis, the final meeting. And he sat me down and he said, Jo, this is the same kid we had last week, the same kid we had last year. All we have now is a name for what we were dealing with. So nothing's changed. We're going to be fine. And it was really like that breath of fresh air, like, okay, you're right. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. So we sat her down because we've always been a very practical, we just put all our cards on the table and we sat her down and we said, Lace, guess what the doctor said? They said you have autism. And she said, well, what does that mean? And I said, it means we're going out to get ice cream to celebrate. And she said, okay. So we took her out to ice cream and we're at the ice cream place. And the guy said, oh, what ice cream did she get? She said, I got strawberry because I have autism. So it is hard, but we've always tried to deal with it with the best sense of humor and just, hey, I have chubby thighs, you have autism. That's just who we are as a family.
Oh, I love that. I love that you guys went out for ice cream to celebrate.
Yeah.
I've never heard of anything like that. And that makes me smile. That makes me so happy. I remember I have a friend whose daughter was diagnosed with autism, and we had known this family since their daughter was really young. And I remember the day that she kind of announced, we were out at the park and she said, we just found out my daughter has autism. And I remember talking to her and asking her, well, is it nice to have to have that label? Is it comforting in some way? And she was like, well, yeah, now we know kind of like you said, like what we're dealing with. I mean, it's the same kid. It's the same kid. And even though that's hard to hear, I love your guys' attitude of this is the same Lacey she was before they told us that. And
Yeah.
now we can just do some things differently if we want to or not, or whatever we choose to do. But at the end of the day, we're going to go get ice cream. So I like
Exactly. Exactly. I came to the realization that I kind of had two things. One, I was going to need to be a lifelong advocate for her. So I had to figure out advocacy, the best way I could accomplish that. And the second thing was I needed to learn to translate the entire world into her language and then translate her language back into the entire world, because those two just don't mesh. And that's the biggest disconnect with high functioning autism, is that she's constantly coming from a completely different perspective than the rest of the world just holds as kind of standard or normal. So we're learning to translate.
So how does that manifest? Like, what kind of things are you talking about?
Well, when they get, a lot of the kids, they just bring in too much information and can get really overstimulated. And then they have to figure out a way to kind of deal with that. And so when she's getting too much information, she'll make weird noises. And so at one point we'll all be sitting, downstairs, and someone's playing video games and I'm playing maybe, a card game with one of my kids, or helping another with homework, or getting dinner ready. So there's a lot of, in a big family, there's a lot of energy in the house, and she
Right.
gets overwhelmed. So she'll come down and just start like crowing like a rooster, making these horribly loud noises, and everybody gets really uncomfortable. And so I've had to explain to her, okay, I understand what you were doing, but here's how everybody else perceived it. And so when you do this in the middle of your classroom at school, it's not going to make you the most popular girl. And so really had to get her to understand, like, these behaviors make perfect sense to you, but they weird out everybody else. And so you got to translate what's happening there. They're not looking at you and thinking, oh, she's overwhelmed right now, and this is her way of calming herself. They're just like,
Right.
this is a strange 13-year-old girl who's crowing like a rooster.
Yeah. So how do your other kids, interact with Lacey?
I am so incredibly honored to have these kids as my kids. My son is, real quick, Lacey is in special ed because she really struggles with learning disabilities. On the inverse side, my 7-year-old is way advanced. We actually put him in a charter school, and he's now in doing 4th grade math, even though he should be in 1st grade. And so he's much more ahead of her. So he helps her, and she didn't understand how to do something, and he was helping her. I think it was playing a video game, and he was explaining it to her, and she wasn't getting it, but he very slowly, for 20 minutes, still kept explaining which buttons to push and how to win. Finally got to the end of the game, and he goes, "Good job. You came in 26. Great job."
That's so cute.
But it was so sweet, and she was really excited. So I found that my kids are learning, one, to be more aware of other people's needs, and also to take a step back and see from their perspective, and then walk them through whatever they need to get to the end of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. That's so good. It really is so good for kids to grow up and to have that compassion and that
Yes.
empathy. It's what we want all our kids to learn. So it's awesome you have that training ground right there in your home.
That we do.
Yeah. Yes. Now, as Lacey's gotten older, how are some of these challenges shifting as she's become a teenager?
Oh, just when I thought I had it down, and I was patting myself on the back that I had special needs parenting down, puberty hit and everything changed on me. So
that is parenting in a nutshell. Just when you think you have something figured out, everything changes.
yeah, and it's you have to start over from square one of figuring out, how am I going to work through this, and how are we going to succeed? Because I can get really overwhelmed. Like, I don't know that I can do this, I say to my husband, and he's like, "You're gonna be fine," So yeah, especially when, in autism, you find that a lot of these kids have executive functioning issues. They don't do well in their day to day, like getting up and taking a bath and cleaning their body, and just little things that you have to work through over and over till it becomes normal. So when puberty hit, then that was so overwhelming, having to micromanage, a 12-year-old who is dealing with puberty and having to deal with all those things. There were a couple days I just kind of went and stood in my master bedroom closet and cried and then, scooped it all together, went back out, and we did it again. We talked about self-care and hygiene and taking care of your body and things like that, you didn't know you didn't know you'd be able to do until you do it.
Right. Again, like a lot of parenting, just like you just don't know how am I going to deal with this, and then you just do.
Yeah.
You do because you have to,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
That kind of thing. Okay, yeah, I can see that sounds like a lot that you don't even think of that you are going to have to deal with. Now, I want to make sure we touch on something you said earlier, and that was you mentioned that you need to be a lifelong advocate for your daughter. And so I want to talk a little bit about what that means of being an advocate for your daughter. And something that we had talked about previous to the call in our emails is um, helping someone with an invisible disability and kind of how that looks different than other disabilities that we see.
Yes. I think there's times that my husband and I have talked that, gosh, man, it would have been so much easier if she had like a syndromic look to her. If people could look at her and think, oh, okay, she has a disability. I understand. And so because we have done so much work with her to be able to not, crow like a rooster in public or do things that are a little off, she tends to fit in better. But there's a lot of disabilities or issues that she has that just don't translate. And so people don't realize, and I think it throws people off. For example, she wanted to go to do a craft at the library for like young adults and teens. And I was really scared to let her go. And I said to her, well, what time should I pick? I said to the librarian, what time should I pick her up? And they said, oh, you know what? She can just call you. And I said, well, she doesn't know how to use a phone. But from the looks of her, she looks like, she's 13. She looks like she's 17, but she's processing life like maybe 7 or 8 on an emotional level. And so there's just certain skills that she has not picked up and we have not forced her to learn, and it's in my list of things to do, but she just doesn't. Like, she doesn't know her home number. She probably couldn't tell you her address. I'm convinced that if we dropped her off at the park, I don't know that she'd be able to find her way back, 10 houses down to our house. Life doesn't process that way for her. So there's a lot of invisible disabilities that people would not assume about her that you have to kind of, you're always trying to find that balance because you don't want to embarrass her and say, well, she doesn't know how to do this, but you can't have people expecting her to do stuff that a 17-year-old would do because they're looking at a child that looks like a 17-year-old.
That's so hard. That is so hard. I mean, and it's a fine line too, because she understands, right? She's right there when you're telling people what she can and can't do, and you don't want to make it awkward or, make things uncomfortable. And so as an advocate, how do you kind of balance that, what other people need to know with, what you're comfortable saying in front of her?
Well, a lot of times I just say we. We are not good at remembering our phone number. So that, my hope is that it's not just, I'm not just pinpointing her. I'll just throw myself into the mix. And I think most people figure out what I'm trying to say. Or I will call ahead a lot of times and say, I'm bringing my daughter and she struggles with a few things. And, so I just wanted to give you a heads up. And, I think if I can get the understanding before we arrive, then I feel like maybe there's a little bit more compassion. But I have very much worked with her that when someone says something to you and you don't know the answer, your answer is always, I have autism and I don't know, or I'm not sure about this. Because if you tell people you have autism, then they're going to be able to work with you more than they just think you're being like belligerent or not wanting to do what they're asking of you. So I've also trained her to say, I have autism and I'm not good at this. I'm going to need help. And just be okay with it, man. Just be who you are.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good. I mean, exactly. She's going to get the help she needs. And if you hear that from a child or an adult for that matter, I have autism and I'm going to need a little help. Oh, okay. Then I know how to help you. Where, otherwise if they're saying that, you're like, wait, what?
Right.
You don't know your phone number?
Right.
Like, this does not compute. I'm not getting it. And so that's wise. That's a great thing to have her just be open and own it.
Yeah.
It's good. Now, in the little bit of time we have left, I'd love to hear just some of the things that you personally have learned through all these experiences with her and as you've had to learn and grow as a parent.
I think probably the most important thing I've learned is to have a sense of humor. There's a point where you just have to laugh. I was talking with another mom whose daughter has the same diagnosis, and we said some days you either laugh or you cry. And so we've found the humor in so much of it. Because it is difficult. It's, dealing with teachers who don't fully understand her needs, or that, she's just too much for them. And so they brush her off to the side and don't give her the help that's required. You just learn to find the humor in it and say, okay, we'll make it through. We're going to make it through the next day. So that's probably one of my biggest. The other one is I refuse to let this diagnosis define us. Excuse me. I do not want to be defined by congenital central hypoventilation syndrome. I just want to be defined by who I am, which is fun and hardworking and exciting and family oriented. It's part of what we have to deal with every day, but we're not going to be held under by this. So that is really where I stand with those.
I love it. I think that, like I mentioned in the beginning with, your social media and the things that you post, that just comes through so much with your sense of humor. Everything at the Isley house just seems fun and funny. And, even some of these posts that, you see and like, oh my gosh, that must be so hard, but they're laughing and, it just comes through. You guys are having a good time, and even in the hard things. Do any experiences come to mind that you want to share with us that you've been able to put kind of a fun spin on, and things that you've found the humor in?
Oh gosh. Real quick, we a couple weeks ago we took our kids to the Bahamas, and when we got to Miami, we realized Lacey's ventilator wasn't working. And so this was a huge trip that we had been planning for 3 years and saving for. And if we couldn't get this ventilator situation figured out, we had to turn around and go home, and just awash. All the money was gone. The whole vacation that we'd been planning for was going to be gone. And so spoiler alert, we were able to get another ventilator overnighted to us. But so for 2 nights, I had to stay up all night long dealing with it, making sure it didn't shut off, making sure she didn't die. If I were to fall asleep, she could die. That is what it was. And, you had to laugh. Like, who lives this life? Who takes their kid to the other side of the country and then hopes that they don't die? And, I was exhausted and I was grumpy and I had no margin left in my okay, let's just deal with it. But I just did. And I just thought, here I am, 2 a.m, making sure nobody dies. It's a vacation.
Good thing we could get away for a while. Oh my gosh. I love it though. Marjorie Hinckley said in something along these lines, I'm paraphrasing, in life, you can either laugh or cry. I'd rather laugh. Crying gives me a headache.
Yes.
And that just came to mind. It does. Why not laugh? You're up at 2 a.m. You could cry, but better to laugh. So I love it. I love that your family is just, finding joy and finding the humor, and you guys are just such a fun family, even with everything going on, and it doesn't define you. What defines you is your unity as a family and your joy in each other as a family. So you guys are doing a good job.
Well, thank you. Thank you for seeing that. That's exactly what we want, is to just count it all joy. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Jo, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing a little bit of your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And thank you everyone for listening to Moms Who Know. Don't you guys just want to be like Jo, laughing all the way through your trouble and your trials and just counting it all joy, like she said? For show notes, be sure to visit momswhoknowpodcast.com. And if you're loving the show, please share it. It helps so much when you do that to get the word out. Thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next week at Moms Who Know.